In this lecture, we will learn about the basics of working with functions in Python. Functions, or methods, are blocks of code that can be reused throughout our program. They are a way to group the code so that it can be easily reused without having to type the same lines over and over again. Functions also come in handy if we want to make a change to a block of code. We can change it in the function body and won't have to make the change multiple times. Functions save us time and make our code more readable and manageable. In Python, a function starts out with the def keyword. Def stands for define and is used whenever we want to define a function. For example, we can define a print high function that will output the string high to the console. When we call our function, we type the function name, followed by parentheses, which tells our computer to execute all of the lines of code in the function body. When we run the code, you will notice that high was printed to the console. Functions can also take in what we call parameters. A parameter is a variable passed into the function that lives only inside of that function. For example, we can write a print message function that accepts a message parameter, as shown here. One difference between Python and programming languages like Java and C# is that we don't need to specify the type before the name of the parameter. Python understands what type the variable is based on what type of value is passed in when the function is called. The message to be printed to the console is supplied when the function is called. Note that when a value for a parameter is being passed into a function, and that function is being called, it is referred to as an argument. So in the function definition, we would say we have a print message function that accepts a string parameter. In this function call, we would say that we are calling the function, passing in the argument hello world. Functions also have the capability of accepting multiple parameters. Don't worry, we will see plenty of examples of calling functions with all different types of parameters in this course. For now, just understand that functions are reusable blocks of code that we can write that can be called in our code easily by typing a one-line call to that function. Also understand that we can pass in variables that live only inside of the scope of these functions, which are called parameters. In the next lecture, we will learn about errors. In this lecture, we will learn about errors. There are times when the code we write may not act as expected. An error is any sort of unexpected behavior or logic within the code that causes it to either function improperly or not work at all. There are three types of errors: syntax errors, logic errors, and runtime errors. A syntax error means that you typed something in wrong. A logic error means that the code runs but does something different than you expected. A runtime error is an error that happens while the program is running. All programmers deal with errors when developing. Don't worry, errors are perfectly normal. When you first start out programming, it may seem like errors are intimidating or hard to fix. But just make sure you stay persistent and keep at it. After a while, you will become more experienced at fixing errors and you will increase your confidence as a programmer. The process of finding and fixing errors is called debugging, and is one of the most important skills you can have as a programmer. When dealing with errors, it is important to remember that the computer only follows the instructions we give it. When an error occurs, the first thing we want to do is check the console of the program we are using to write and execute our code, and see if any error message has been logged to the console. Depending on the console, it could tell us the type of error and the line number where the error is occurring. In the next lecture, we will learn about basic Python syntax. In this lecture, we will learn about the basic syntax of the Python programming language. One of the most important Python syntax rules is that code is grouped through indentation and not curly braces. For example, in Python, an if statement would look like this. In C# or Java, the if statement would look like this. When a line of code is indented under another in Python, it belongs to the code block for that if statement, loop, etc. When we type something in like an if statement in PyCharm and then hit enter, the program will auto-indent our cursor under that line, which is helpful so that you don't have to manually indent your code. Also, comments in Python start out with a pound symbol. We use comments to make notes to ourselves and other developers when coding. Comments are not executed when the code is run. If you are familiar with other programming languages, you are probably used to ending lines of code with semicolons. In Python, the end of a line terminates a statement. You never need to end a line with a semicolon. However, it is technically valid to end lines of Python code with semicolons. It's something that you can do, but nobody does it since you don't have to. However, it is useful if you want to include two statements of Python code on the same line. Another important element of Python syntax is that while indentation is important, and an element of the syntax to group code, white space within lines does not matter. Therefore, the line a equals 1 with a space on either side of the equals is the same as a equals 1 with no space on either side of the equals. In the next lecture, we will learn about the modulus operator. In this lecture, we will learn about the modulus operator and how to work with it in Python. The modulus operator is represented as the percent sign in Python. It takes the remainder of division between two numbers. For example, we know that 3 divided by 2 leaves us with a remainder of 1. Let's use the modulus operator and log the result of 3 modulus 2 to the console using Python's print function. When we run the code, you will notice that 1 was printed to the console. Note that this is the remainder, not the quotient. When 3 gets divided by 2, it goes in 1 time. We call this resulting 1 the quotient. We also are left with a remainder of 1. To further illustrate the use of the modulus operator, let's print the result of 4 modulus 2. When we run this code, you will notice that 0 was printed to the console. This is because 4 divided by 2 is 2, with a remainder of 0. One of the most common uses of the modulus operator is to check if a number is even or odd. For example, you may see a program use an if statement to check if a number modulus 2 is equal to 0. Say we have a variable named x, set to a value of 3. Then we will use an if statement to check if x modulus 2 equals 0. If that is the case, we know that x is even, since 2 was evenly divided into it without a remainder, so we will print even number to the console. Else we will print odd number to the console, since we know that 2 did not divide evenly into x without a remainder, meaning that it is an odd number. When we run the code, you will notice that odd number was printed since 3 is an odd number. In the next lecture, we will learn about the different keywords that Python supports. In this lecture, we will learn about the different keywords that Python supports. The AND keyword is a logical operator that will evaluate to true if all of the conditions are true, and false otherwise. The AS keyword allows us to create an alias. The assert keyword is used for debugging and writing unit tests. The break keyword is used to stop execution of the innermost loop or control flow statement. The class keyword is used to define a class. The continue keyword will stop the current iteration of a loop and move right on to the next iteration. The def keyword allows us to define a function. The del keyword will delete an object. The elif keyword stands for else if and is used in conditional statements. The else keyword will execute in the event that the if and elif statements above it evaluate to false. The except keyword is used with exceptions and handles what to do if an exception occurs. The false keyword is the Boolean value false in the Python programming language. Please note that Python is case sensitive, and you need to type false with a capital F in order for the program to recognize this keyword properly. The finally keyword is used with exceptions. Any code inside of the finally block will be executed no matter if there is an exception or not. The for keyword is used to create a for loop. The from keyword is used to import specific parts of a module. The global keyword allows you to modify a variable outside of the current scope. The if keyword is used to start a conditional statement. The import keyword is used to import a module. The in keyword is used to check if a value is present in a collection. The is keyword is used to test if two variables are equal. The lambda keyword is used to create an anonymous function. The none keyword represents a null value. The non-local keyword is used to declare a non-local variable. The not keyword is a logical operator that takes the inverse of the current Boolean value. If it is used with true, then the condition becomes false. If not is used with false, then the condition becomes true. The or keyword is a logical operator that will evaluate to true if one or more of the conditions is true, and false otherwise. The pass keyword does nothing. It is just a placeholder, usually used when we want to mark spots in our functions that we want to code later, and we use it as a placeholder for actual code logic. The raise keyword is used to raise an exception. The return keyword is used to exit a function and return a value. The true keyword is the Boolean value true in the Python programming language. Please note that Python is case sensitive, and you need to type true with a capital T in order for the program to recognize this keyword properly. The try keyword is used to surround potentially problematic code in case it throws an exception, and to start off a try except statement for error handling. The while keyword is used to create a while loop. The with keyword is used to simplify exception handling. The yield keyword is used to end a function, and it returns a generator. In the next lecture, we will look at a recap of what we learned in this section of the course. In this lecture, we will look at a recap of what we learned in this section of the course. First, we looked at the differences between Python version 2 and Python version 3. Then we learned how to print Hello World to the console using Python. Next, we learned about working with variables in Python. Then we learned about the console. Next, we learned about conditional statements like if, elif, and else. Then we learned about loops in Python, including the for loop and while loop. After that, we learned about variable scope and identified the difference between local and global scope for variables. Next came a lecture on namespaces and modules. Then we learned about comments in Python. We used the hashtag symbol for comments, and we can use a triple quoted string to create a multi-line or block comment in Python code. Next came a lecture on function basics, where we learned how to create and work with functions in Python. Then we learned about errors, what errors are, and the basic types of errors in computer programming. Then we learned about basic Python syntax. After that, we learned about working with the Modulus Operator in Python. Finally, we learned about the different variables that we have available to us when programming in Python.